You're listening to episode 106 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Air Hug Community, or welcome if it's your first time here. So I would love to share with you what the Air Hug Community is all about. First of all, why the name Air Hug? Well, it's interesting, and I don't know if I've told this story in a while, so I'm going to retell it. At the height of COVID, I had been driving down a busy road in our area where we live, and I saw this amazing sign, and it just simply said, it was a sandwich board, and it was a bright yellow sign in black letters, and it just said Air Hugs. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, that's what we all need right now, is some wonderful air hugs. And that really haunted me, and I kept thinking about it. And at this time, I was also preparing this podcast and didn't have a name yet, but it reminded me of airwaves, and it reminded me of how we really can reach out and support each other. And so this podcast is all about a great big giant air hug where we can put forward a way to grow and support and learn and be inspired. It's a place for us to pay it forward, at least for myself and my guests, where we have stories and conversations that actually are just pretty much relevant to all things. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and say it, midlife. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's podcast is a little bit different. You're going to be listening to a clip of me being interviewed by Dr. Sandi Webster, and we're really talking about labels in midlife and loving where we are, and how people may have crises, but they're not necessarily midlife crises. We get into a lot of things such as food deserts and what we need to do to prioritize having a better midlife. And what is the number one, maybe not the number one, but a very high prevalent problem that happens to midlife women. But let's talk about our host today. So our host is Dr. Sandi Webster, and she's a consultant, an educator, a speaker, and an author. Her current purpose is to give back to small business owners what was given to her, which is knowledge of how to create and run a successful business. So she loves to use this quote, expect the best, prepare for the worst, and capitalize on what comes, by Zig Ziglar. She has developed workshops and programs that have transformed businesses, and she talks about how to be a better leader, how to do business with corporations, and how to form an advisory board. Now, you may think that none of this is related to living your best midlife, but actually there are so many nuggets in this conversation, and we really do stick to midlife in this conversation. But Dr. Sandi Webster is a wealth of knowledge, and I found her to be extremely fascinating. By the way, her first company, Consultants to Go, appeared 6 times on the Inc. 5000 list for the fastest growing companies in the USA, and it was sold to a private equity firm. So anyways, she is a lady who gets stuff done.
Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Hey everybody, today I'm speaking to Judy Arizosha. Judy started Grateful Fitness as a form of self-help because she needed to know how to manage her own midlife health and nutrition. She could not find gyms or online gurus who spoke specifically to health needs for over 50-year-olds, so she started a business to address that. She places a high value on weight training and making sure women are strong and treating our body in a respectful manner versus hating it and punishing it and feeling shame. She addresses this on her podcast, Air Hug Community. Hey everybody, Today I'm speaking to Judy Arizosa. Judy is going to tell us all about what she does today and how it impacts others. So, Judy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here. And yes, my name is Judy Arizosa, and I have a business called Grateful Fitness, which grew out of a need to actually help myself first. First, it was something I did to help myself, and then I wanted to pass it on to others. But it was how to manage midlife healthiness, how to manage midlife fitness and nutrition. And what I found was that a dozen or more years ago, I didn't really find gyms or things online that spoke
Mhm.
to midlife women in fitness. And so I said, well, okay, I've been kind of figuring it out, trial and error and self-educating. And I've always had a huge love of healthcare. I was in healthcare before I had children. So this was a natural progression.
Okay. No, well, it's definitely a topic that I think most women never see coming, but once it gets there, we're all like, oh, we're in midlife. What do you define as midlife?
Gosh, that's a really good question because, I'm 61 years old. So, like, technically, I'm probably past midlife because do we know anybody who's lived to be 120 and a half?
We're the same age. We're
Wow, yay, how exciting. So, I kind of define midlife from when you start to feel those changes in your body until the end of your life because you don't really know how much longer you're going to live. So, I never say that I'm past midlife. I just say I'm in midlife, and it's kind of an attitude in a way to live more fiercely than kind of settling. I don't want to settle.
I've heard women in their 30s say they're in midlife. And I personally think that's too young given the lifespan of a woman, right? I think we're supposed to live to be in our 80s, average lifespan for a woman. So
Yeah.
midlife to me starts at like 40.
I think 40 is a good round
That's
number.
great.
If you're thinking that you're in midlife at 30, I think you are selling yourself short.
I
Yeah.
know. I never understood that. And they're like, oh no, I'm going through a midlife crisis. I'm like, nah, it's a crisis, but it's not not a midlife one.
Not a midlife one. You just need to get over it, deal with it, but don't call it midlife. I didn't really feel like I was in midlife till I was probably 52,
Okay.
honestly.
I,
I would
I'm
say
I'm
that
not there yet.
you don't feel like you're in midlife yet? I love it.
I don't think it's here yet, Judy. And like I said, we're the same age, so I just don't, I just live,
Love it. And,
and I
and
don't,
why do we have to classify it, right? We're so
exactly. We're just living our lives and we're in that period of our lives where we have different issues than when we were in the first phase one and phase two, right?
yeah. Yeah, there are just different phases to life, and I think you don't automatically have a birthday and enter a phase. It's just, of course every body and every mind is different. So it is what it is. You just kind of go through, but it's really important to love where you are now and
Yeah,
not mourn the past. You can celebrate the past, but I would never mourn it.
absolutely. Can you talk about what health crisis you had and how it changed your life? Is that something you feel comfortable talking about?
I don't know that I had a health crisis, but I would say that I just noticed things were different. I'm a little stiffer when I wake up in the morning. It's not a crisis. I'm very blessed. I've never had a serious illness,
Hmm.
which is, I can still golf and walk 18 holes and carry my bag. I highly place a very high value on strength training, which is known to be something to ward off the signs that people associate with aging. And
Yeah,
aging doesn't have to, and maybe so those people in their 30s who think that way, maybe they're already weak because if there is a fountain of youth, it's being strong. And
it really is. My mom just had back surgery and she just came home. from the hospital yesterday. And you don't know how important it is until you actually see how good your health needs to be. And something like your back, like we don't see our backs, right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
behind us and we have no eyes behind there. So it's not something you see all the time, like our boobs or anything in front of us. So you don't pay as much attention to your
Mm-hmm.
back until something happens. Then it's like, oh, my back. You discover your back when something happens. We
Yeah, that's
stop, you hear don't pick up certain heavy things, but you pick it up because you're not paying attention. And then all of a sudden it's the most important thing and it's responsible for your walking, for your sitting, for
mm-hmm.
your sleeping. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
important is that? Is everything that, you talk about health is your back supports.
And I'll tell you what, that is why, and we can get off on a little tangent or go in this direction if you want, but that is why I actually prioritize training with my clients what I call the posterior chain, which is everything basically from the back of your neck down to your ankles.
Mm,
Everything back there is your back, literally. And that is what keeps you strong. And
yes.
that is so that you can lift heavy things. I just had to lift a 40-pound bag of dog food off my driveway and it was fine. I was like, all right, just don't trip me, dogs. Let's go. Come on, because they were
Right.
out with me. But that should be something that I hate, first of all, I don't like shoulds, but it's important for us to know that we can steer ourselves into a healthy existence and stay there for as long as possible by keeping our muscles strong. And we really do need to keep our back strong. And that includes our bum.
Yes. And, part of that is nutrition too, right? Because
Correct.
keeping whatever you eat goes into your body, and those muscles either develop or deteriorate based on how you're eating or get lax sometimes. Like me the other day, I'm like, what is this little thing? I think I'm pretty fit, but what is this little thing? So all of a sudden that's your muscles not getting enough work. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't been lifting as much weights as I used to, but it shows up, and that determines, am I tired if I lift something, or can I
Mhm.
even lift it, right?
Yeah, well, and of course, you don't want to strain yourself by lifting more than what you can safely handle in good form with, of course, with a neutral spine, for example. But it's if you are not getting stronger, if you're over age 30, and this is actually a fact, not something I pulled out of an air. If you're over age 30 and you're not doing something to get stronger, you are getting weaker because we
That's
don't
true.
main it's a fact. And so yes, you may not see it so much from 30 to 40, right? But people will see it from 30 to 50 and from 30 to 60 if
Right.
you haven't been working to get stronger. And I'm not talking about cute little triceps and biceps, which are great. We don't want to ignore them, but you want to talk about the central part of your body, right? That whole posterior chain we talked about, your abdominals, the larger muscles of your legs.
Right.
Those
So
are things that are very important.
what are some of the body issues you see women have in this midlife that we're in?
You know, what really surprised me is I actually did some digging and looked up a little bit of research in body image in midlife is actually, and I think we probably hide it better, or I'm not going to say we, but women who are maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s might hide it a little bit better, but it's just as much of an issue as it is for adolescent girls and women in their 20s. So the fact of the matter is that the body image issues are a lifelong issue for women, and it's different. But if you think about it, we go through all these changes, right? We get to adolescence and we're kind of uncomfortable with, oh my God, we have developing breasts. Maybe one develops bigger than the other. We all of a sudden we have these hips. The next thing you know, we bloom stretch marks. Like, where did those come from? And we're kind of still a child and we get into our 20s And in your 20s, it's pretty easy to kind of just pick up a little bit of exercise and eat a little bit less, and you think that you got it all
A lot
figured
of
out.
20-year-olds don't even eat, don't even exercise.
No,
They
they
think
just,
they can eat forever and it's going to stay like that. And the exercise is running to brunch. That's the only exercise they get.
right? Yeah. Right. And I know you live in an urban area where people maybe do a lot of walking. I don't live in an urban area, but I do a lot of walking on purpose.
Okay.
Um,
The on purpose part is good
mhm.
because you do have to make the effort to get up and go walk. In the city, we don't even realize like taking the train every day is an exercise, right? And
You're
that's what
going up and down those stairs? Sure.
every day. And my mom did that. She just retired from her job at 79.
Woohoo.
When she retired, she's now past 79, but it was keeping her young.
Hmm.
She walked to the train station, unless it was cold, I'd give her a drive. She went up numerous flights of stairs, going up, catching, coming down. And that
Hmm.
was her exercise. And then she had to walk after she got off the train, like I call them city blocks, those long blocks
Yes.
to,
Hmm.
and that's a good quarter mile that you're getting. And so she was staying active just by going to work and walking around at work and interacting. And we don't really think about that as getting your exercise in the city.
Yeah, well, I call that non-exercise movement, which I think it's lovely for urban people or people who live where there are sidewalks.
Yes.
I live in the woods. So while I'm out in the woods a lot with my dogs, I have to make an effort to really get out there and move, and definitely, obviously, dress for the weather, which is fine. I'm fine with that. Of course, we're recording this in the middle of summer, so how hard could it be? Um, but I mean, sometimes it's 90 and sometimes it's 0. And we, we do it anyway,
Yeah.
because we are not meant to be sedentary.
And the dogs help to get you out.
They
Like if
love
you
it.
don't have a dog, there's no reason to go outside when it's 0.
Yeah, right. That's true. And I'm like, hold on, I have to bundle up. You guys don't have to bundle up, but I do. Yeah.
And what do you love about what you do? What do you enjoy, and what impact does this have on other people, especially young women?
So, what the impact is going to be kind of more of a ripple effect, because I work with women who are generally over 40, in the basically from their 40s into I have people in their 70s. But they've been with me a while, and I fully intend to keep them, as long as they are
Mhm.
willing. But what I see is I help women learn to love themselves where they are while working to get stronger. And they all understand that if they're not getting stronger, they're getting weaker. And we work in a very small community.
Mhm.
So my sessions are in a very small community, but the ripple effect is that these women are setting an amazing example for their daughters and sons, and so
Yes.
that they know that this is not your this is I don't know how others people's grandmothers were, but this is not the kind of grandmother, this generation. We are not sitting in chairs and just saying it's time to sit back and watch life from the sidelines. We are showing people that we are living fiercely, and we're doing what we want, and we're doing it in the best of health. And I think it's a very good example for the younger people to know that. I know that my daughters and sons very much appreciate that their parents are very, very active.
That's interesting that you put it that way because I find the younger generation, they do the video games. They're actually they sit a lot. Now they have to sit in Zoom for school, and
Mhm.
and they're just sitting a lot more than we did, right? And until they get to the late 20s or where they're actually don't have to sit in class all day or sit whatever, I don't think exercise is really impressed on them as to how important it is, because they just grow up, oh, it's easy to sit here and, get a video game, play a video game. And the obesity in teens, particularly young people and teens, have increased in the
Yeah.
last couple of years. And that's a global issue. It's not even just like a US issue, because the toys that we have now
Life
that
is too convenient. Yeah. It's interesting because I kind of don't have that generation in my family, my immediate family at this point. So we have grandchildren, and then I have children from like 29 to late 30s. And they already, the 29 to late 30s, like even some of my children have to be on Zoom for work, but they make it a point to get out and exercise. So,
nice.
and they have always seen me from the time that they could remember. I would get up before they were awake, and I would get my workouts in my little basement gym that I've always had a basement gym, and I would get that workout done before I even got them out of bed. And they always knew that,
Yeah.
and
No,
sometimes
that's
on a
good.
weekend,
That's good that they grew up with that.
they grew up with that, and they are all into exercise, that makes me very happy. So I do feel like I have had an effect on them, and they value that.
And how are you sharing your knowledge with women and younger people? How do you go through that process of sharing what you know?
Well, actually, for the last almost 2 years, is it going to be 2 years? It's going to be 2 years next month. I have had a podcast called the Air Hug Community Podcast.
AIR hug?
Air Hug. And
Oh,
that name, because that was 2020 when we couldn't hug in 2020.
that's right.
And I just thought, like, but we want to hug. And social connection was so important. I know you remember this during COVID. And so I thought the name of this, because I wanted to connect with people. So I also thought kind of the airwaves. So it's the Air Hug Community Podcast. It is a way that I connect with and share my knowledge. I do it also on social media and through an email newsletter.
Okay.
But I don't want to rely on social media. It's kind of funny. I have a love-hate relationship with social media
Oh, we all
because,
do.
right, we don't own the content, right? I love Instagram as much as the next person, right? And I have my favorite little accounts, of course, that I have to check on every day. But at the end of the day, Instagram and Facebook, we don't own that. And
Right.
so we can't really control it. So I think it is important for, I like to put an email newsletter out. I put out a podcast every week. And that is how I connect with people. And I'm out there, I teach, I have my business, Grateful Fitness. So it's small group, private, personal training and
Okay.
nutrition. And that has a ripple effect because honestly, most of my clients come from clients that I already have. Even online, even my clients in other states will refer to me because they're like, well, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, well, I get on Zoom with this lady and she trains midlife women. And
No, I think that's amazing that you're doing that, because it's hard to go to a gym, right? At least for me to get up. It's work to go to a gym. Before your workout, you do the work of getting your
right,
stuff together, and you have to get there, and then the stairmaster might be full and you've got to sign up for, here in Brooklyn, that's
right.
what
And it might be dirty. I mean, it probably isn't, but you'd worry, I mean, I think people are much cleaner than ever these days. But there is definitely anyone who has room for it, and you don't need a lot of room to set up a home gym.
exactly.
Um,
Mine is right behind me. Like, my
yeah,
weights are on the floor. I have a bin over there with my elastic bands and my
yeah.
TRX,
Oh,
so
I love TRX.
you don't need a lot.
No, you don't. You actually don't. I know. And a lot of people, sure, if you want to have an Olympic bar and barbell, that's great, but it's not required, you know. So, yeah. And I'll tell you, there's something about the convenience of not having the commute, but you do have to make an appointment with yourself. Like, okay, I'm going to do this at this time, or I'm going to get online with my trainer on Zoom at this time because this
Right.
is the time that, that I've reserved.
Well, having a trainer just pushes you. I don't have a trainer right now, but I did. And I find when I want to stop, like now, if I do 10 and I'm like, oh, let me go run and do something. When I have a trainer, it's you do 20 and then you're doing something else. Like there's no stopping for that hour that you're doing it.
Right.
Where on my own, it's so easy. The phone rings, let me stop for a minute, and then you're 20 minutes on the phone, right?
Yeah.
But I like to walk. I go out to the park and I do my laps or a little bit of running, and that way it's not being interrupted. And so
That's a
that's what
wonderful thing. Yeah. That's a wonderful thing. I think as much walking, I don't think you can overdo walking. I really don't. And it's a great stress reliever. We do need to strength train too, but there are ways to do it. And I always tell people you want to get your workout program from someone who specializes in your phase of life and someone who has experience in living what you've lived. They've walked
yeah,
in your shoes, right? So they understand.
that's a great idea. I never thought of it as such because yeah, if I go to get exercise from a 20-year-old, unless they've specialized in like senior strengthening, they're probably going to give me something that's not necessarily for me, or more could be more or less strenuous, right?
It's going to be hard for them. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be harder for them to be empathetic with the situations that come up. And let's face it, things come up. People, literally every day I hear someone saying, well, my knee doesn't want to go that way. And we're like, all right, well, let's stop and see what's a modification. Right. And some of it is, worn out. Things do wear out, and it's
Yeah,
okay. We can work around it and strengthen the muscles around them to keep them functioning just fine. But we have to work a lot more on mobility. And that's something I think that I certainly didn't understand in my 20s. I was mobile. It was like, oh, you could bend all over the place. Now takes a little work.
no. So did anyone inspire you to start this business or to start paying attention to your health? I remember Jane Fonda back in the 70s,
Oh
and
my gosh.
yeah, even Suzanne Summers, was very, very early into just the squeezy thing. I don't remember what it was,
The
but yeah,
Thigh Master.
I'm-
Right?
but I used to say, my God, those women look good. And I aspire to be that healthy and that fit when I'm their age. And yeah, maybe I'm not as fit as they were, but getting inspiration at an early age really helped me to stay the way that I am. Did anyone do that for you or?
It's interesting that you mentioned Jane Fonda because in my college dorm room, where we still had a record player, a turntable, when we got back from the library at night, there was, I think, 2 semesters where some of my girlfriends on my floor and we would do the Jane Fonda workouts. And definitely we aspired to be she was pretty darn fit,
Yes, she was. She
you
still is.
know?
You see that woman today, she's amazing.
Yeah. So, if there was one person I think that I looked up as a fit person, to me, I looked at Jane Fonda more. I also just looked at a lot of athletes,
Yeah.
and there were not too many older athletes back then. I think the gymnasts,
There
they
are a lot
peaked
more now.
early. There are a lot more now. Now you see women running marathons and doing triathlons. I don't think the first women ran a marathon. Well, the first woman who ran a marathon actually disguised as a guy, right?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a thing. Yeah. And then
Wow.
there was another one who actually got on the subway and cheated. Awful, right? What
Yeah,
people would do. But anyways, then, women started running in marathons. So that's relatively recent.
yes.
I think that was in the 80s. We can double check that, but anyone
But
can
now
correct
here's
me.
Serena at, 40, 40 with a baby or, and
Right.
still
Yeah.
not looking to stop, right?
Right. Right. And how about Billie Jean King? She was a trailblazer.
Yes, yes. The Chris Everett Lloyd, the Billie Jean Kings, all those women who were out front are
Yeah.
definitely inspiration to all of us.
There was
Have
a
you?
wonderful swimmer named Brooke Bennett, an Olympic swimmer. And I was actually very inspired by her. And actually, one of my children swam competitively. And I was a little probably in my, probably already 40 at that point. But I remember my daughter being very inspired by her. In fact, I think there's still a picture of Brooke Bennett hanging in her bedroom.
I know. I don't. People don't do that anymore. Like I don't see
Um,
a lot of posters on bedrooms walls for kids because they have it on their phone.
right? Isn't that so different? Yeah.
You used to walk in and the Farrah Fawcett and the, Jackson 5 posters, like that was
Yeah.
decoration, room decoration. Today,
Yeah.
there's none of that because they just bring it up on their computer and they could see it or on their phones. I think Instagram is the new wallpaper, new wallpaper for your room, right?
Yeah. And
Instagram,
TikTok. Right.
TikTok, and those kind of things.
Hmm.
So, knowing that you're taking on being the first to kind of help with this movement. I mean, you're not the first, but you're the first right now that's doing it out there, especially in this age group. Does it make you want to do other things? Like, where are you in life now? Do you just want to stay on this, or do you want to do other things because you have the energy and the strength to do it?
I have the energy and the strength. You're right. You know what I want to do? I want to send a message to women that you don't always have to keep being on a diet. And I think this is such, everyone is looking for, and they want to classify it. Well, what do you eat? What do you eat? What do you eat? And whenever I gather with women in like maybe a women's event or like socially, it's always like, well, what are you ordering and what's she eating and what do you eat to look like what you look like? And I say, well, the reason I look like the way I look is because I'm an individual and you're an individual, and there isn't a fad diet in the world that's going to work. And I really feel so bad for people who pour the money into these fast
I do.
fixes. We have to really learn to adopt a healthy lifestyle. And now, healthy is a vague term, but healthy really means eating more plants than animals. And I'm not saying, I'm not going to get political or philosophical
No,
or
no,
conservational
no.
or anything, but the human body does better on more plants than animals. We can still eat animal food, but we need to eat a lot more whole unprocessed food than what we're used to. And again, we've become a society of convenience. We want to buy a snack bar instead of maybe eating a piece of fruit,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And we need to just keep it simple and really major in vegetables.
There are so many places, and I know in Black neighborhoods, this is something that I've been talking about. They're called food deserts now in neighborhoods where there are no grocery stores, no fresh fruits. They have to travel a long way. Senior citizens have to get on a bus to like
Oh
go
my
shop.
goodness.
Uh, and yeah, they're called food deserts, and it's all over the U.S. where you find there might be a supermarket, but their fruits are not as fresh as the farmer's market because some areas don't have a farmer's market. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a real issue today because now they're eating what they have, right?
Yes, and
Canned stuff, uh, stuff that are stale and not fresh. Even the meat is not fresh. So
mm,
it's it's hard on some people to get that fresh food that you want. But you can, people, I always say people in Africa, they don't get a lot of fresh fruits, but they make do with beans and find other nutritional sources that they can use.
yeah, that can be a real challenge. I actually didn't realize that there was actually a lack of quality groceries
Yeah.
available in different pockets.
In Chicago and in Michigan, there are areas you have to get in a car or take a cab to go to the neighborhood that has fresh fruit. are even the right things. There's no Whole Foods, at least Whole Foods help you eat a little healthier by what they bring, or
Yes, no,
Trader
or
Joe's,
yeah,
or
right.
they have
National
those, but
grocery chain, yeah.
yeah, they don't have those. And so for them,
And if they don't have a vehicle, yeah,
they just don't do it. And so
yeah.
the obesity comes on because you're eating what you have or what you have available to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that totally negates all the stuff that we're talking about, because even if you work out, you're still going to be putting stuff into your body that's
Yes,
not
right.
good.
And we don't want to be putting in things that are not optimal for our body. There's a whole thing about brain health. We don't, and a lot of the processed food that is convenient food that maybe if they're getting their food from a convenience store and some of it is
Mhm.
like meal type foods versus single foods,
Yeah.
they're getting on, they're getting bad fats and way too much sodium versus if they could cook themselves, if they had the ingredients available.
Well, I think those cities, I just watched something this week on that. I think
Mm-hmm.
in Detroit, the city is bringing in outside help, meaning
Mm.
they're bringing in the farmers from outside of Detroit so that they can have a farmer's market and, fresh fruits. And you should see the line for this stuff at the farmer's market.
It's
Like,
amazing.
and this is America. This is
This
America.
is
This is not a
America.
third world country, and I'm talking about cities, like big
Yeah,
cities, and that's happening. So yeah, we still have work to do.
we
What
definitely
what
do.
tips would you give to the middle-aged woman who wants to get in shape?
Well, personally, I would say, first of all, start walking. If you're not already walking, walk. If you are already walking, I'm so proud of you. Keep it up. Make it part of your daily routine. Definitely get into a strength training program. So do your research. You can look online and find a trainer that resonates with you. There are so many online Zoom trainers. You can set up an easy, like we talked about, very easy little bunch of weights and resistance bands, maybe a little ball and maybe a TRX, which you can purchase gradually over time. It does not have to break the bank, but I do think it's important to have a program that is geared for you and someone that you can answer to. Whether you're doing it with your best friend and the two of you are going to get together every day and do it, or maybe 4 days a week, whatever it is, or you're going to meet with a trainer on Zoom. And it's very affordable. And basically, if you think about it, it's an investment in your future. You could pay this way now, or you could pay with expensive hospital bills and devastating illness later, which we don't want to do.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Judy. This has been fun and interesting, and knowledge was laid out today.
Well, that was a lot of fun. If you'd like more information on how to contact Dr. Sandi Webster, I will put the information in the show notes. Thank you again for listening to the Air Hug Community Podcast. Yes, this was the Air Hug Community Podcast, but this originally appeared on Dr. Sandi's web podcast, the first. Anyways, have a great week, and I will see you back here next week on the Air Hug Community Podcast.